Every time onions go on sale, I tend to buy a big bag to save for later. But if you store them the wrong way, they can turn soft, sprout, or even rot before you use them. I've made that mistake before and had to throw some away, such a waste. After trying many ways, I kept a few simple ones that really work. Let's go through them together. Hi everyone, I'm Mira. In real life, I do not always use a whole onion at once. Sometimes I only need half for a soup, a quick stir fry, or a small pan of scrambled eggs. But if I just put the leftover half in the fridge without doing anything, a few days later, the cut side usually turns dry and the inside starts getting soft. Then, when I take it out again, I do not feel like using it anymore, and that always feels like such a waste. So, whenever I have half an onion left, I always do one small step right away. First, I take a dry paper towel and gently blot the cut side. This helps remove the extra moisture. If the onion still has some of its outer skin, I leave that on, because it gives the onion a little more protection. Next, I place it cut side down on a piece of plastic wrap and wrap it tightly, pressing the plastic close to the surface so very little air gets in. After that, I put it into a small airtight container and store it in the fridge. This method is very simple, but it really helps. The onion stays firmer, the cut side does not dry out as fast, and the smell is easier to contain. For a smaller household, this is such a practical way to save what is left and use it in the next meal. Before we move on, I'm really curious. What do you usually do with half an onion? Do you save it for later, or do you end up throwing it away? Comment 1 if you save it, or 0 if you toss it. Let's see what most people actually do in their kitchen. When I know I will be cooking several times during the week, this is one method I use a lot. It makes everyday cooking feel much easier, especially on busy evenings when I do not want to peel and chop onions over and over again. First, I peel the onions and cut them based on how I usually cook. Sometimes I dice them small for fried rice or scrambled eggs. Other times I slice them thin for soups, stir fries, or sautéed dishes. You can cut them in any way that fits your cooking habits best. That flexibility is what makes this method so practical. After cutting, I place the onions into an airtight container. I try to spread them out a little instead of packing them too tightly. This small step helps later, because once frozen, they are less likely to stick together in one solid block. After that, the container goes straight into the freezer. Stored this way, chopped onions can keep their flavor for about 3 to 6 months. They will not stay crisp like fresh onions, but for cooked dishes, they still work really well. Whenever I need some, I just take out the amount I need and add it directly to the pan. No thawing, no extra steps. What I like most is the convenience. Having onions ready to go saves time and makes cooking feel a lot less tiring. When I want cooking to feel even faster, this is the method I use most often. There are days when I do not even want to spend a few extra minutes chopping onions, especially when I am making soup, stew, pasta sauce, or a quick stir fry. On busy days like that, having onions already prepared in small portions makes such a big difference. First, I peel the onions and cut them into smaller chunks so they are easier to process. Then I put them into my food processor and pulse a few times. I do not blend them too finely. I like to leave them a little chunky because that texture still works very well in cooked dishes and does not turn watery too quickly. Once the onions are chopped, I transfer them into a zip-top freezer bag. Then I gently press the onions outward so they spread into a thin, even layer. I always try to flatten the bag as much as possible because it freezes faster this way and also makes it easier to break off only the amount I need later. Before sealing the bag, I press out as much air as I can. That small step helps protect the flavor better and also reduces freezer burn. Next, I use chopsticks or the back of a spoon to gently press lines across the bag, dividing the onions into small sections. Each section is just enough for one cooking session. Then the bag goes straight into the freezer. After a few hours, the onions are fully frozen. Whenever I need some, I just take the bag out, break off one section, and add it straight into the pan. No thawing, no measuring, and no extra prep. For cooked dishes, this is one of the most convenient ways to keep onions ready in the kitchen. When I want to keep onions for much longer without taking up freezer space, this is the method I use. I really like it because once the onions are fully dried, they become very easy to store, very light, and convenient to use little by little. This is especially helpful when I buy more onions than usual and want one method that lasts a long time without worrying about them going soft, sprouting, or spoiling too soon. First, I peel the onions and slice them thinly. I usually try to keep the slices fairly even so they dry more evenly later. They do not have to look perfect, but if some pieces are much thicker than others, the thinner ones will dry too fast, while the thicker ones may still hold moisture inside. After slicing, I spread the onions out on a tray lined with parchment paper. I always try to arrange them in a thin, even layer and avoid piling them on top of each other. That small step really matters because better airflow helps the onions dry more evenly. Next, I place the tray into the oven or the air fryer at a low temperature, around 90 degrees Celsius or 195 degrees Fahrenheit. Low heat is important here. If the temperature is too high, the onions can brown too quickly and the flavor changes. I want them to dry slowly so they keep more of their natural aroma. Depending on how thick the slices are, this usually takes around 40 to 60 minutes. About halfway through, I like to check on them and gently move them around a little so they dry more evenly. Once the onions feel dry and crisp, I take them out and let them cool completely. After that, I store them in a clean, dry glass jar with a tight lid. At this point, I can use them as dried onion slices or blend them into onion powder for everyday cooking. And when I buy onions in larger amounts, this is the method I always use. The reason is very simple. If onions stay in a plastic bag or sit in a place with poor airflow, they trap moisture very easily. Once that happens, they start softening from the inside, and sometimes by the time you notice it, several onions are already spoiled. I have made that mistake before, and throwing away onions just because I stored them the wrong way always feels like such a waste. So whenever I bring home a big batch, the first thing I do is prepare a dry cardboard box. I keep the onions whole and leave the skins on because that outer layer helps protect them naturally. Then I place the onions into the box gently, making sure not to pile too many on top of each other. I always try to leave a little space between them so air can move around more easily. After that, I make a few simple moisture-absorbing packets. I take a piece of paper towel, place a spoonful of baking soda in the center, and fold it into a small packet. Then I put these packets into the corners of the box. This is such a small step, but it helps keep the air inside drier, which really matters when you are storing onions for a longer time. Once everything is ready, I place the box in a cool, dry, well-ventilated area, away from direct sunlight and away from moisture. Since I started using this method, my onions stay dry and firm much longer. They do not feel stuffy like they often do in plastic bags, and they are much less likely to soften too quickly. It does not cost anything extra, uses simple things I already have at home, and helps me waste far fewer onions. With just these 5 simple methods, I only need to prep once and can use onions for a long time, very convenient and far less wasteful. Since I started doing this, I rarely throw onions away anymore. On busy days or slower ones, I just choose what works best. Which method fits your kitchen best? I'd love to hear your ideas. Thanks for watching. See you next time.